In 2007, Ubisoft launched the first game in what would turn out to be their most popular franchise, Assassin's Creed. What followed quickly was a whirlwind of games and a continuation much past the original storyline of Desmond and the modern assassins. Soon enough, Assassin's Creed would have 14 mainline installments by the end of 2025 and 17 spin-off titles. This brings the number up to a whopping 31 games in 18 years. The latest iteration of Assassin's Creed is set in perhaps the most demanded setting, Feudal Japan. I saw one post online that said if this game was released in 2016, it would have sold 1 billion copies. And I can't say that I disagree. But the controversy for Assassin's Creed Shadows started almost immediately after being shown off, with Yasuke as the main historical character in the game. What's odd about the backlash is that it seems to be along the lines of, if Ubisoft wanted to use a historical samurai, why didn't they use someone who was way more prominent, and why didn't they use someone who wasn't black? The criticism partially stems from the lack of information regarding Yasuke. Although he was mentioned and depicted in Japanese history, there isn't as much information as you would see on other more prominent samurai. Oda Nobunaga, who the Jesuit Alessandro Valignano wanted to have an audience with, caught wind of a black man being in Japan and wanted to see him. Nobunaga took him into his service to work for him and made him a samurai. He was given a sword, a house, and a stipend. Yasuke accompanied Nobunaga to most places. He liked having him around, and Nobunaga thought it made him seem powerful. When Nobunaga died, Yasuke returned to working with Jesuits. That was it. There are no other records of his life past that, at least not widely available. I don't even think we know what his actual name was, just the name that he was given by Nobunaga. From what we can see so far in Assassin's Creed Shadows, it probably is safe to assume that's not what we're going to be told story-wise. Apart from being far from the first time Yasuke has appeared in modern fiction, with a 1968 children's book winning awards in Japan, the inspiration for a 1971 satirical novel, and a 2008 play that has later actually been made into a proper stage play, there are also 6 anime or manga appearances, with one of them being Yasuke inspiring the Afro Samurais franchise. There was even a Netflix anime directly called Yasuke that featured a black protagonist. There are multiple films being developed about Yasuke, and he's already been featured in the video game franchises Guilty Gear, Nioh, and Samurai Warriors. I suspect part of the reason why Ubisoft chose to use Yasuke over other samurai with more documented life stories is that there are, in theory, decent gaps of knowledge as to what Yasuke actually got up to with his time as a samurai. One of the core foundations of the Assassin's Creed franchise has always been the victor writes history. Going back into time to see the Assassin and Templar War throughout history, it's clear-cut that history can seem a little one-sided at times. Although there is a real-world implication to the statement the franchise makes, it's important to note that these are historical fiction games. This isn't meant to be a love letter to feudal Japan or an accurate interpretation of history. What's also interesting is Yasuke is the only protagonist based off of a real historical figure that you'll be playing for a majority of the game. Ubisoft has said that you'll be able to swap between Yasuke and Naui at your own accord once they're united. We don't know how long it will take to get to that point, and we don't know how much of the game will be open world. Some other installments in the franchise have had brief periods of someone playing a real person, like Jack the Ripper in Assassin's Creed Syndicate DLC. But for the most part, you're playing original characters and frequently bump into other real historical figures. This gives Ubisoft a lot of freedom to escape criticism, and it wouldn't have been a bad idea to stick to this for Shadows. The idea of swapping between Yasuke and Naui in an open world isn't a new feature for Assassin's Creed, and you'll likely be required to do certain missions as either Yasuke or Naui. I could understand why people would be upset about the future of Assassin's Creed if this was a new experimental storyline, or if it was concerns based on gameplay with Ubisoft branching into a completely different direction. After all, not every risk pays off when a franchise switches things up on players. But I'm not so sure that these concerns players are voicing are actually based on gameplay. It's by now that I'm sure most of your patience has worn thin, as I'm clearly avoiding a giant elephant in the room. No, I don't think it's okay to get upset about Assassin's Creed Shadows just because Yasuke is black. Could there be ulterior motives by Ubisoft? Sure, why not? Could it coincidentally line up as the first historical figure they're using as a protagonist you're seemingly going to be spending a lot of time on happens to be a black samurai? Yeah, also probable. The thing is, unless someone directly comes out and tells us, we're never going to know. There is a lot of finger pointing going on. Specifically, Ubisoft is basically run by HR, and the likes of higher-ups having a lot of control over creative directors in these games. We already know these companies are established as not the best work environments, So why are we rehashing this conversation in a critique of an upcoming video game suddenly? If you have a problem with Ubisoft using a Black Samurai as one of two main characters, I'm not sure I'm going to follow why you're upset. I could understand in certain circumstances if you were upset because you would have liked to see them portray a certain samurai if they were going to use historical figures. If you're into feudal Japan history, you probably have a favorite samurai, and it would have been cool to see it on the main screen as a protagonist. But one thing I've been noticing is weaponizing the fact that Japanese gamers are angry, making claims that every single gamer in Japan is upset by this. We're not going to brush this under the rug. Clearly, there was enough of an outcry since Ubisoft made an official statement on Assassin's Creed Shadows towards Japanese gamers. But it doesn't really explain what this statement is about. Besides the re-explanation that the Assassin's Creed franchise has never been historically accurate, it's infuriating to know that they're talking about some criticisms, but we don't know for sure it's the big one, the Yasuke one, that we're talking about in the Western world. There was a statement made by the director that there will be correcting historical inaccuracies, but that had to do with tatami mats being square-shaped and not rectangular-shaped. It was a completely different statement as well. But let's get something straight if nothing else. Assassin's Creed has never been historically accurate. You cannot sit there and tell me that the Ezio timeline, which they milked for 3 games, is an accurate depiction of Italy during that time. Perhaps there are some historical accuracies, but most of what you're seeing is fiction. That's the point. It's a fictional game with a fictional story based in historical settings. It's a historical fiction. Ubisoft even said in their statement about Shadows that we have put significant effort into ensuring an immersive and respectful presentation of feudal Japan. However, our intention was never been to present any of our Assassin's Creed games, including Assassin's Creed Shadows, as factual representations of history or historical characters. Instead, we aim to spark curiosity and encourage players to explore and learn more about the historical settings we get inspired by. If we cared about historical fiction in these games, we would have rioted over Ezio Auditore years ago when the franchise was just starting. But there was no outcry, there was no outburst, it was completely fine that they had a random Italian man with some random notable Italian families as supporting characters. There was a lot of reworking in some of those games of history. A lot of the work done in those games took creative liberties with historical figures. And I'm going a little bit off script here for a minute. I've paused everything that's going on my prompter because it's occurred to me as I'm recording this that perhaps one of the reasons why Ubisoft felt comfortable using Yasuke as the first, historical main character that you're going to be playing as is because so many other people already have. So as we just went over, he's featured in multiple game franchises. He's featured in multiple animes and books and movies that are upcoming. Everyone's kind of doing their own spin on Yasuke, and maybe they were like, well, we can too. We can too. So we can all sit around on our haunches and say that Yasuke was never an actual samurai and he got an honorary title and there isn't enough information on him to use him as a prominent figure. And we have no historical records of him fighting or defending anyone. And that's all fine and good, but it honestly really does not matter, at all. What does matter is that this is a really great opportunity for Ubisoft to lean into Japanese culture and highlight some of the samurai we have more information on. I have no doubt this is already implemented into the game, like running into Leonardo da Vinci in Assassin's Creed. Although it's a pretty big change for Ubisoft to be using a historical figure as a main character, is there something wrong with trying to embrace a bit of change in a franchise that is nearing 20 years old? If historical accuracy has never been an issue for you as a player beforehand, it probably shouldn't be now. And if they had picked your favorite samurai, you'd be equally as upset about the lack of historical accuracy within that depiction. We're kind of at a lose-lose situation here, and although I am for change, some days it's easier to just wish Ubisoft had gone back to doing an original character put into real-world events in feudal Japan. It makes the whole thing so much easier, and the at times vitriolic discussions that are happening right now likely wouldn't be happening at all. But we can't ignore the super weird undertone of the discussion of why Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to be horrible besides the Yasuke drama. And there's this rhetoric of the game looking tired, dated, or playing old. And I've rewatched gameplay videos at least 3 times for this now, and I just don't see what everyone is seeing. Perhaps my standards are just low for graphics. I don't really care if it looks like a real-world cut and paste. But I know for sure this game does not look dated and tired. There's a big focus on exploration in the Assassin's Creed franchise, which isn't groundbreaking or straying far from the past. An Assassin's Creed gameplay loop routinely relies on viewpoints to unlock more of the map and navigate your surroundings easier, as well as objectives that are not rooted in the main storyline. I'd even go as far to say that the game looks incredible to me, with weather effects being showcased that we haven't really seen in modern gaming yet. Ubisoft purposely highlighted a beautiful thunderstorm effect in one of the clips they've published for us. I know that gamers and consumers in general love to complain. I know that we can't see the good in anything, but holy crap, I'm so tired of judging a game before we've even gotten our hands on it. I had this whole idea of how I wanted to approach the secondary topic to the issue at large, and what I kept coming up with is Ubisoft has a proven track record, and then it made me realize that this goes against everything I believe in. I don't like to pre-order. And the argument being made here that the game will be bad is the same as making the argument that the game will be good, and we can guarantee the enjoyment we want to gain out of Shadows. That's also not good thinking. I played every Assassin's Creed up to Black Flag and absolutely loved every one I play. I intend to play Shadows and perhaps pick up some of the games I missed over the years, but here's the thing, I'm still not going to pre-order Shadows. Pre-ordering a video game would be okay if games were returnable, but in most cases they aren't. In the digital distribution era, there is almost no point in pre-ordering unless it allows you to pre-download the game. Even in the case of pre-downloading games, it's likely that the game has a day one patch you have to sit through anyways. And with thousands of other gamers waiting to download that same day one patch, it's not like it's going to breeze through the download and installation process for that. We've just been dealt a bad hand when it comes to pre-orders as a consumer, and the only way to fight that is to stop pre-ordering. But what isn't going to help us stop pre-ordering is sitting around casting judgment on a game we don't A, have enough information on, and B, have never played before in our lives. How are we supposed to consider a game as playing bad if we've never even taken the controller in our hand and tried it out for ourselves? What does playing bad mean to a lot of people? Perhaps it comes down to how things were implemented, a large input delay that's at fault of the developer, or not being able to control things easily. But for a lot of people, it's the game is too hard, the game is too easy, the game just doesn't feel like what I'm used to. Innovation in gaming doesn't come along very often anymore, and the ability to innovate is taken away from developers when judgment is cast so hastily about a new installment in a franchise. What confuses me the most out of everything that's going on with Assassin's Creed Shadows, besides the Yasuke drama, throwing away the prejudgment on the game, is have we forgotten that most of the time, these games are actually pretty good? I'm not going to say that every Assassin's Creed is a masterpiece, set apart from the entire industry and making revolutionary leaps in gameplay in between installments. But I am going to say that if you purchase an Assassin's Creed game, most of the time you're guaranteed an enjoyable experience and at least decent story, if not one that you can greatly enjoy. Look, I slammed the Ezio trilogy a bit, but it's an incredible story in gaming. It is different for all of us whether the story will even resonate with us. I think a story can be good without it meaning a lot to you, but I would consider the Assassin's Creed 3 storyline good and it resonated deeply with me. I know it does not resonate with a lot of players, and perhaps it was the timing of coming off of Ezio Auditore's story, a fan favorite, or people just don't really want to talk about that era of American history. But either way, whether it resonated with you or not, I think it's not going off on a limb to say the story was pretty good. And that's how I would summarize most of the franchise as a whole. Pretty good. So if you've made it this far, just let me know if you have an opinion as to why Assassin's Creed Shadows is going through as much controversy as it is. Or are you even excited for the game at all? Do you also think it's going to be awful? Fill me in on what I'm missing. Because at this point, it kind of just feels like we want to complain for the sake of complaining, which honestly wouldn't really be that much of a change in the industry at this point, but it is what it is. My name is Elena, and you've been listening to Beyond the Button Mash. You can join the discussion for each episode in the YouTube comments or on Discord. Beyond the Button Mash is available on major podcasting platforms like YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Thanks for listening.